So we are recording this meeting, as you may have just heard, and it will be available on our website at some point in the future. So I'd like to start sharing my screen, and we'll go over what the how the meeting will flow tonight and what we're going to do to kick things off. So tonight is a virtual conversation, as we're calling it. It's the first of several that we'll be doing over the next several weeks. And this evening's presentation is just a general overview of the draft Unified Development Ordinance. So the way this meeting will work is that we have a few slides to run through for you that will give you an idea of what is in the draft UDO, how it's arranged, where to find things, what we've been doing so far to try to get the word out and try to get some community feedback on the UDO, how you can give that to us, and what our schedule's like, where we go from here. So as we're going through the slides, if you have comments or questions along the way, please use the chat feature of Zoom. Hopefully by this time, I think everybody knows how to use Zoom. And our staff will, as best we can, try to keep up with your comments and questions in chat and try to answer as many as we can as we go along while we're going through the slides. And then when the slides conclude, we can go back and talk about any comments or questions that may not have been answered, and perhaps take any additional questions that you may have. So that's how we plan to conduct the meeting. We only have an hour, so we're trying to be respectful of your time. So the purpose of this meeting is to basically answer questions about what's included in the UDO and how it's organized, and to help clarify, if we can, what's in there. We're not necessarily going to be able to answer specific detailed questions about what's in the UDO at tonight's meeting. We have meetings scheduled that we'll be able to get into the UDO in a little bit more depth, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So here's our schedule as of today. We released the draft UDO in October. We're currently in the midst of our public engagement process, where we're gathering comments and feedback from the community on the first draft, and that will continue through January. And at that point, once we close public comments on the first draft, staff and our consultants will go through all of them. We'll figure out which of those comments and feedback we want and need to incorporate into the second draft of the UDO. So in March, we'll release a redlined version of the first UDO with changes, any changes that have been made, additions, and so forth. And that will be the second draft, and everybody will be able to see the changes made because it will be redlined. So we'll have another public engagement period on the second draft. That will be March and April of next year. There will be a third draft, which is a council public hearing draft. A public hearing before the city council on that draft UDO. That will take place in June. And then it will also be reviewed by the planning committee of our planning commission. And after that, there will be a fourth and hopefully final draft, which we're calling the adoption draft. And that is the one that will be voted on, put before city council for votes. And we are hoping for an adoption by city council of the final version of the UDO in July of 2022. So the UDO is essentially the land development regulations for the city of Charlotte that currently exist throughout our city code in different chapters of the city code. You can see on the right-hand side what those regulations are. And we are putting those all together into a single document, the Unified Development Ordinance. And it's our primary tool for implementing the policies of the adopted Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. And the reason we're doing it is, well, first and foremost, it will be the primary regulatory tool for implementing the policies of the comprehensive plan. We think that it will create more predictability for development for both developers and the community. It will align all of our regulations so that they work well together. As you saw in the previous slide, they all exist now in separate chapters of the city code. They were written and modified at different times along the way, and they don't always work together. The terminology isn't always the same. So the UDO will bring them all together into one document and hopefully work more seamlessly together. While we're doing that, we are updating some of those regulations as needed, and to hopefully reflect what the best practices are in the planning world and other disciplines in the UDO. So we're basically bringing our regulations up to date with what the current best practices are. We hope that the UDO will be more user-friendly than our existing regulations. If some of you are used to using our zoning ordinance, you know that it sometimes is a struggle to find what you're looking for. We think and hope the UDO will be better in terms of being able to do that. And finally, we are complying with the new North Carolina 160D legislation, which deals with planning in the state of North Carolina. So our UDO is divided into 5 parts, if you will: an introductory section, a section that deals with zoning and zoning related regulations, subdivision, streets and other infrastructure, stormwater and natural resources, and finally UDO administration. Having said that, the UDO is further divided into 13 parts, and each part has one or more of the 40 articles in the UDO. So there are 40 articles in the UDO numbered 1 through 40. Part 1 has the Article 1 and 2, the introductory articles, the title, purpose, and applicability, the rules of construction, abbreviations, and definitions. Part 2 is the introduction to the zoning regulations. Part 3 is neighborhood zoning districts, Articles 4 and 5, which have all of the regulations for our neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2 zoning districts, new zoning districts. Part 4 contains the employment districts, Articles 6, 7, 8, and 9. And these are new zoning districts for the commercial place type, the campus place type, manufacturing and logistics place types, and the innovation mixed use place types. Part 5 are the centers zoning districts, Articles 10, 11, 12, and 13. New zoning districts for the neighborhood center, the community activity center, regional activity centers, and our transit-oriented development areas. Part 6 are the special purpose and overlay districts. Part 7 of the UDO deals with uses, that's Article 15. Part 8 are our general development standards, many of which are currently found in Chapter 12 of our zoning ordinance, but this also includes other requirements, including our parking requirements, landscaping and screening, and our sign ordinance. Part 9 is stormwater and natural resources, and you can see several articles there for watershed protection, drainage, post-construction stormwater regulations, swim buffers, floodplain, erosion control, and trees. Part 10 is subdivision, streets, and infrastructure. So it includes the subdivision ordinance and additional regulations for street requirements and other infrastructure. Part 11 is administration, with 3 articles dealing with how to administer the UDO. Part 12 is nonconformities. And finally, part 13 contains Article 40, which is enforcement of the UDO. So as I said before, we released the first draft of the UDO on October 7th. We are currently in our community engagement period. We've had several in-person events over the last couple of months, beginning with several pop-up events across the community at different venues. And we just concluded last evening with our fifth public open house, and those were spread across the community in different locations to try to reach all geographies within our city. And we're now starting today with a series of virtual conversations, online meetings that will be more focused. Our open houses were designed as general informational sessions for people who were interested in coming in and talking to experts in various subjects in the UDO and getting questions answered. The virtual conversations that we're starting tonight will be more focused on different areas of the UDO. And this is the first. This is a very general discussion as we go, and you'll see in a slide or two what some of our upcoming virtual conversations are and what they'll focus on. So you may want to come back if you have particular interests in certain areas, kind of pay attention to when those sessions are going to be and make sure that you sign up for those. So currently we're accepting public comments through January 14th. So you can make those online, and I'll talk about how to do that and where to do that in a couple of minutes. So as I said, we are engaging people through virtual and in-person meetings, but also through our website and our social media posts. We will be reviewing comments as we receive them, and we're asking for comments to be made online through our portal. And I'll show you again how to do that in a minute. And if you're interested in keeping up to date with what we're doing on the UDO, you can go to our website, charlotteudo.org, and sign up for updates, and you will get notifications when we've issued something new that we want you to know about, or meeting reminders and so forth. So here is what I was talking about a minute ago, the rest of our virtual conversations that are coming up. We're currently in the first one, the general UDO overview. These conversations are 1 hour long. They will be held twice on the same day, covering the same topic both times. The first one will be from noon to 1, and the second one will be from 6 to 7 p.m. It's the one we're in tonight, obviously. Registration is required. You can register online at our website, or you can use the QR code that's in the upper right-hand corner of this flyer. Actually, you can probably take your phone and scan that now right off the screen if you can, and maybe get to that location to register for the next one. So the next several, I can go over them really quickly. Our next one after tonight is next Tuesday, the 7th of December. It will be an overview of the new UDO zoning districts. So if you're into zoning and interested in that, you'll want to make sure that you sign up and register for that. Thursday of next week, the 9th, we'll be talking about trees and the new tree regulations in the UDO. I know a lot of people are very interested in that. The following week on Tuesday, the 14th, the session will be on subdivision, network, and access and other infrastructure. And then the following Thursday of that week, the 16th, we'll talk about neighborhood zoning districts. I know a lot of residents are particularly interested in the new zoning districts in their neighborhoods. The week after that, the 21st, the Christmas week, we'll talk about administration. And then we'll take a break for the holidays and come back in January. So on the 4th of January, we'll have a session for frequent users of the UDO. It will be more of a question and answer session to try to get to as many specific questions as we can for people who really want to get into the weeds of this ordinance and will be using it on a regular basis. The following day on January 15th, the 5th rather, the session will be on stormwater. And the day after that, Thursday, it will be parking, landscaping, and open space. And our final scheduled virtual conversation will be January 11th. And the topic will be required new streets improvements and associated standards. So let me tell you a little bit about the website and what you can do there. As I've said, it's www.charlotteudo.org. And when you go there, you'll come to the homepage, which will look like the image on the top right. And right in the middle of the homepage will be that orange box that says now available Unified Development Ordinance. Clicking there will take you to a page that looks like the image just below it, where it says either download the full UDO, which you are certainly welcome to do. It's 600 pages, give or take, as a PDF, or you can get into it section by section. If you don't want to download the whole thing, you can read it by topic. So you'll be able to see that you can click on each of the smaller pieces of the UDO and download that. And you can also go there to make your comments on the UDO. This is the only place we are asking people to provide their comments and feedback is on this portal on our website. And the reason for that is so that we have a record of all of the comments and questions. We can share your comments and questions with the community, and we can provide responses and also share our responses online. So please try to make your comments and provide your feedback using this portal. So as I mentioned, 602 pages or 608 pages, I think it is a pretty big document, although it is smaller than our current regulations, but it's still a pretty big document to try to get through. So we have developed a 26-page reference guide, which is also available on our website. And this will walk you through the articles of the UDO and just give you a brief description of what's in each of those articles, so that you just get a good idea of how it's laid out and where you need to go to find out the information that you're looking for. And it also will summarize some of the new regulatory concepts that we're introducing in the UDO, such as residential overlay districts, a new approach to parking using a three-tier system, new tree preservation regulations, and transportation improvements. And how you get to the reference guide from our website is really easy. Across the top in the menu bar, you'll see a drop down for helpful resources. Use that drop down list, and the first thing you'll find is a tab for reference guide. And if you click on that, it will open up the reference guide as a PDF for you, which you can either read online or you can download. So that concludes the slide presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I may get back to that. And I'm looking in our chat feature and I'm not seeing anything yet. So we've either done a really good job of explaining everything, which I doubt, or just haven't come up with your questions yet. So we will wait. And if you want to enter any comments or questions on what you've just seen, what I've just talked about, feel free to do so. As I said, we're not here to really get into the details of the UDO at tonight's meeting. We'll do that in our more focused meetings that will come over the next few weeks. I see we're getting some comments now coming in, so thank you for that. We'll be here as long as we need to be here up until 7 o'clock to try to address them all.
So I had a direct comment to me just asking if the meetings will be recorded and posted on the UDO website from Vicki Jones. And yes, all of our meetings will be recorded and posted on our website, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you're unable to make that zoning meeting, you'll be able to access the recording there. So thank you for your question.
Yeah.
So maybe put out there, are there any things you've heard about the UDO that you want to know where to find in the actual draft. Just trying to kind of think of the kind of things that people might have questions about. Are there wondering where to find information on a certain topic? Wondering, maybe there's information that you're familiar with or not in our current regulations that you want to know if it is somewhere that you could ask us to tell you where it's located in the UDO, how this is organized differently from our current regulations. So the noon group was quiet, and you guys are even quieter.
Submitted a canned question. So I'm on the UDO team, but there's threw that out there as something that we had a conversation about in the noon meeting. Maybe might be helpful for people that are on the call today. Stephanie.
Alan, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, the question that I'm seeing, hopefully it's the one you're talking about, Laura, what is the best resource for understanding the changes from the old ordinance to the UDO? I would start with the reference guide that we just talked about. It is not necessarily going to be a side-by-side comparison to our current ordinance. That's very difficult to do because it's not exactly comparing apples to apples. But the reference guide will give you a pretty good start on what to expect in the UDO and how that might be different from what our current regulations are. So after and that's a pretty easy read, 26 pages, and there's lots of pictures. So it reads fairly easily. So I would start there. And then if you still have questions, I would encourage you to sign up for one of the virtual conversations in the areas that interest you.
I think also Kevin, who's also on the UDO team, but knows what kind of questions we're getting, has put a question in the chat about place types versus zoning. And I was going to see if Chris with Camiris would be good enough to maybe talk through that.
Would you like me to share a graphic for that?
I think that would be helpful, Alan.
All right. Let me
Yeah,
pull
that would
up.
be very helpful.
Let me do that.
Okay, so I think, if anyone is a little bit confused between sort of the language coming out of the comprehensive plan around place types and then what you're hearing the UDO team refer to with things like zoning districts and regulations, that's understandable, right? So we've developed a couple of resources here to try and help bridge the gap or to illustrate exactly sort of what the difference is between the policy that's coming out of the comprehensive plan and the regulations that we're trying to put in place through the UDO. So it's kind of helpful, I think, to understand these at three separate tiers. The first, sort of the overarching tier. The comprehensive plan is a visionary document, right? It's adopted by the city. It's intended to guide decision-making in the city over the next 2 decades. The UDO is not visionary. Everything that's in the UDO is mandatory. It's requirements, it's enforceable regulations that govern the development that will take place in the city over the course of that same time period or longer. The comprehensive plan contains a series of place types, which are really an organizing element that classify different places within the city. And they do that based on a series of general principles that define those places. An example of that is an innovation mixed use place type within the Charlotte 2040 plan. Whereas in the UDO, an organizing principle is zoning districts, and zoning districts contain legally enforceable, again, rules and regulations for development. So they're necessarily more detailed than what you're going to see in the place types that are within the city's comprehensive plan. So an example of a zoning district that would directly correlate to a place type is the innovation mixed use district. And what gets really interesting is when we get into the context and the content these place types and these zoning districts. So place types contain a series of concepts that really sort of outline and detail what are considered to be some defining characteristics of those place types. So things like newer office, residential, and mixed use buildings typically have heights of up to 6 stories in the IMU place type. The zoning and the Unified Development Ordinance would translate that directly into a series of regulations or law. So we take the general concept and we say the maximum building height is 80 feet. It goes from, typical to this is what the maximum is. So we're translating the guidance and the concepts from the place types in the comprehensive plan into specific regulations and rules for development in the city, in the UDO. So those are that's the key difference. Was that clear, Kevin?
Yeah, you know what, Chris, I appreciate it. And I throw it out there, and I think Andrew too, just because, those of us joining us this evening may not be as well versed as certainly a lot of us that work on this project are. And so we have an understanding that you may not even know necessarily how to ask your question to be able to put it in chat. So I would encourage anybody on here, we want you to engage with us. We want you to put your questions and comments in chat. But if you're struggling with how to ask your question, please feel free to raise your hand or come off mute and, verbalize what it is that you need clarification or you're seeking clarification on. And then, we can work with you to try to get to what it is that you have a question or what you would like to discuss. But thank you for that rundown, Chris.
Oh, of course. Yep.
Good evening. My name is Bernetta Mitchell. I have a question. I've been struggling with trying to figure out how does a community have input on a change of a place type? Or how does the community become engaged with what's getting ready to happen in their community by virtue of these new zoning districts? Other than coming to these meetings, which have a lot of moving pieces, for lack of a better term, which can sometimes become hard to comprehend and tie all the pieces together. But the bottom line is that once this is done, the UDO is approved and these regulations and laws and zoning districts are implemented and executed. What does that mean to the average citizen who is getting ready to have 500 homes built next to them, right? How do they get engaged? How do they become engaged?
So there are probably a few different places, but I would say now is the time to get engaged. That place type, the policy map, the place type map is going to lays the foundation for anything that we would be recommending, virtually anything we'd be recommending in the UDO as far as the type of development that would occur on a property. Hopefully, folks are familiar with the policy map effort that's been going on, but it is not over yet. If you go to, and we can pull up, Alan did that earlier, the comprehensive plan website, which is, again, the foundation for the UDO, there is the place type map. And that is going to guide what zoning districts we would propose to apply to different properties. So it's really important to get engaged on the front end. Certainly in the adoption of that policy map, the adoption of this UDO, and that whole process from now to adoption, continuing to be engaged. And also we will be looking at possibly aligning some zoning to make sure it's consistent with the policy map after the adoption of the UDO through rezonings to properties. But if the policy map you're not comfortable with, that is the first piece that you need to be comfortable with and to get clear on, because we will make all of our recommendations based on that policy map.
So place types, policy maps are taking R3 to neighborhood 1, right? 1A.
They're
But what-
taking
But you,
the single family, so there's a current land use map that would show those as single family or
Laura, your
residential.
mic has,
yeah, you're static, yeah. Sorry.
you may want to.
Try that one more time, Laura.
I don't know if I'll be able.
Uh-oh.
Nope, I think it's,
Yeah, let me see if I can jump in and pick that up.
So
Um,
where I'm trying to go with this is the existing zoning has new terms and definitions.
Yes.
And so the new terms will, I'm asking this question, will be applied to the new definition without knowing if that new definition is appropriate for the current zoning?
Let me see if I can explain the yes and no, or yes and. So you started to use an example of R3 zoning. So R3 zoning is a residential, low density residential district. When the UDO is adopted, there won't be any more R3 zoning. There will be zoning that looks like R3 zoning, but it will have a new name. It will be N1A. So the current R3 zoning all across the city of Charlotte will translate, we're using that word translate, to the N1A zoning, which is a new UDO zoning category. The actual standards in N1A look an awful lot like R3, very little difference. R4 will translate to N1B, and R5 will translate to N1C. I think you understand that. If that's not the right zoning, if that N1A zoning is not the most appropriate zoning for that area or that parcel, because for some reason it doesn't line up, that maybe that area was not mapped as a neighborhood 1, and so the N1A district may not be the most appropriate district for that. Nevertheless, it will translate to N1A because it has to become something. But then at some point in the future, we'll go back and look at all of those parcels. And if the zoning doesn't align with the place type that's been designated for that area, we will do some alignment rezonings, and we will try to put the right zoning on the ground for those place types.
And is that where you're coming in to do the area maps 2 years from now?
No, I think you're talking about area planning, and that's
Area planning.
yeah, that's a different process. We're talking about, after the translation, going back and doing some alignment rezonings to fix anything that doesn't line up with, we're bound to have certain places where the zoning that got translated isn't the right zoning in the long term because it doesn't line up with the place map, the place type policies. So I use an example, and maybe it's not a great example, but it's if an area is mapped as, say, a regional activity center, which is a mixed use center, and for some reason there's some parcels in there that are zoned industrial, say they're zoned I1 or I2. When the UDO is adopted, that I1 and I2 zoning will translate to the new ML1 or ML2, which is basically the equivalent of I1 or I2. But we know that in the long term, we don't necessarily want industrial zoning in a regional activity center. It's not appropriate. We don't, it's not the kind of uses that we want and the kind of development we want. So we will go back and look at those, what are now ML1, say I1, the equivalent of I1, that's somehow ended up in this regional activity center and say that is the wrong zoning for a regional activity center. We need to rezone it. And then we would proactively rezone those industrially zoned parcels to an appropriate zoning district for the regional activity center.
Can you remind me of the website in which you can go and look at the existing zoning of an area so that, and do you have a website that redefines those under the new place types?
No, although we have in the UDO, and I believe it's in Article 3, we have a table that will that shows you which what the
Yeah.
current zoning districts are going to
And
translate to.
the, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to get to is, again, for people who aren't, again, not sure what this all means, right? So we're having a time now trying to get people to understand what a rezoning from an R3 to an R8 means and the impact that that has. So if the city through this remapping, once the UDO is approved and try to quote unquote align the appropriate place types, what input and feedback would a community have to say, no, we don't want it to be a neighborhood center. We actually want it to be business. I can't remember what that place type is, so that we can build economic development.
Yeah.
So where's the tool that would help us understand what is existing so that we know what you're thinking about coming in and changing it to?
Okay. Again, starting at the Charlotte Future Place website, rather, which I hope you can see on the screen.
I've read the comp plan.
Yeah, as you scroll down from that website, you'll see the policy map section. And there's a button for get engaged. There's also a button for view map. The map, the policy map, when you click on that, you'll come to something that looks like this. All of these little tabs are comments that people have made so far on the policy map. And also they're doubling up and using this map for comments on this Charlotte Streets map as well. So you can click on and see the comments that have been made on the various areas of the policy map. Now, that's the policy map, and I wish I could get rid of all of these blue and green tabs so you could see it a little clearer. But the second part of your question is the website that you can go to see the current zoning across the city is Charlotte Explorer. I hope you can see that now. You can Google it, or the URL is explore.charlottenc.gov. And when you go there, you'll get an overall map of the city. And then over on the right-hand side, you'll have a layer list. So to look at zoning, you expand the planning piece, and you have to click on check the planning and then expand it, and then scroll down, and you'll see all of the information that you can put on as a layer on top of this map. We'll go all the way down to the bottom and near the Z's and click on the zoning layer and give it a minute to refresh. And it looks really messy because we're zoomed way out, but we can zoom in, and as we do, you will see all of the various zoning districts that we currently have today. I just zoomed in on an area that is in the, looks like the Optimus Park area, or NODA 19th Street. So you can see that we've got some TOD zoning there. You've got the rail yard across the tracks. You've got neighborhoods here that is got some R5 zoning in this area. So that's how you find the current zoning all across the city of Charlotte, by going to Charlotte Explorer, clicking, expanding the planning section of the layer list on the right-hand side. Make sure you check that so that it's checked. And then scroll down and check on the zoning layer. And that will bring you to the zoning map. You can also use this search box here in the upper left and type in an address or a parcel number, and it will take you to that parcel. I encourage everybody who's interested in this to just use Charlotte Explorer. There's a lot of information available to you on this map. Our current land use map is available as a layer here if you're interested in knowing what the current land use recommendations are and how that might align with the place type policy map. Various overlay districts like our PED district, our historic districts, these all have clickable layers so that if you click, you can find where our local historic districts are. You can see them there shaded on the map. So there's a wealth of information available to you.
Appreciate that.
Alan, I do want to point out, and this is hopefully can be helpful for you, Ms. Mitchell, that although the policy mapping comment period that you're looking at may show that it is closed, there will be additional time to make comments again for the next draft of that comes out at the top of the year. So I don't want it to seem as if you will never be able to make an additional comment and that it's completely closed. That as you're looking at it, as you prepare your comments, there will be an open period for additional comments. The policy mapping team is currently working on that second draft of that map based on the current comments that they've received. So there will be additional time.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't see any additional comments in chat. So why don't we say that we can end this now, unless you want to unmute and jump in with a question or try to get a comment in the last minute. Otherwise, we can hang around for another couple of minutes and try to clean up any loose ends that we may have. But I'd like to thank all of you who signed up and attended tonight. I hope you found some of this information to be useful. And I hope that you'll continue to join us on these virtual conversations for the meetings that cover the topics that you're most interested in. And again, the schedule of virtual conversations is available on our website if you missed it as we went through the slides. If you'd like me to go back to it, I can certainly share that again so you can maybe snap a photo of it. So why don't I do that as kind of a last piece here. So again, the upcoming virtual conversations will take us right through the early part of January, each covering a different topic in the UDO. So if you want to take a look at that and go to our website and register for the sessions that you're most interested in, we would love to see you there.